You know, it's a rather peculiar thing. We live in a world that, for the most part, works perfectly fine. The birds don't hold meetings about how to sing better. The rivers never sit down to analyze their flow. Trees don't stay awake at night wondering whether their branches are growing in the right direction. And yet, we human beings, the clever ones, the self-proclaimed masters of reason, we suffer from problems that don't even exist. Yes. Isn't that funny? Your life might be perfectly all right. The sun rises, the air still fills your lungs, and yet the mind whispers, something is wrong. But have you ever asked yourself, wrong with what? You see, the human mind is a magnificent thing. It can calculate, imagine, create, and dream. But left to its own devices, it becomes like a monkey in a palace, pulling every lever just to see what happens. The mind begins to invent problems, little ghosts, shadows that look terribly important but disappear the moment you turn on the light of awareness. The mind is a marvelous servant, I once said, but a terrible master. And most people live as though they are its servants, running about trying to solve problems that were never there to begin with. Have you noticed that? How often you find yourself worrying about what might happen tomorrow or replaying what happened yesterday as though you could edit the film after the credits have rolled. It's quite absurd, isn't it? The trouble begins when the mind, which is meant to serve life, begins to believe it must control life. And this, my friends, is the beginning of unnecessary suffering. The ego, that curious image you have of yourself, is terribly insecure. It wants to be certain. It wants to be right. It wants to be safe, important, understood, respected, admired endlessly. And so it sets about constructing an imaginary world in which everything must be held together by its control. But life, you see, does not like to be controlled. It is far too wild, far too spontaneous. The ego wants to hold the ocean in its hands, and when it cannot, it calls it chaos. It wants to stop the wind from changing direction. And when it cannot, it calls it loss. It wants to make permanent that which was never meant to last. And when it cannot, it calls it heartbreak. But the tragedy, or perhaps the comedy, is that the world itself was never broken. The suffering comes not from life, but from our insistence that it should obey our plans. The ego's addiction to control is like trying to make the clouds stand still. It forgets that clouds are beautiful because they move. Muddy water, I said once, is best cleared by leaving it alone. And so it is with the mind. The more you stir it, the more you think you're fixing it, the cloudier it becomes. But if you leave it alone, if you stop fiddling and fussing, it settles. It becomes clear. Then suddenly you begin to see that nothing was ever wrong with life, only your thoughts about it. You see, the mind is that mirror. It reflects whatever you project upon it. But instead of changing the projection, we fight with the reflection. We blame the mirror for showing us what we are. This is what I mean when I say that the mind creates problems that don't exist. It's as if the mind is constantly looking for something to fix because fixing things makes it feel useful, important, alive. But when there's nothing to fix, the mind grows restless. And so it manufactures an enemy, a worry, a problem. It says, what if I lose this? What if I'm not good enough? What if they don't like me? And there you are, trapped in an imaginary web, struggling against phantoms. The moment you start to believe these thoughts, the dream becomes real. The anxiety becomes a storm, and you call it my life. But life, you see, has no such worries. The trees are not anxious about their leaves. The ocean doesn't compare its waves. The stars do not fear being forgotten. They simply are. And you are that same universe playing a temporary game of being you. But you've forgotten the rules. You think you're the player, not the play. You think you must control the show rather than simply perform your dance in it. You see, control is the great illusion. The ego says, if only I can hold everything tightly enough, then I will be safe. But what you hold tightly slips through your fingers. What you cling to becomes painful to grasp. You cannot imprison life because you are life. When you begin to see this, something very curious happens. The mind starts to quiet. The ghosts lose their power. You realize that the monsters in the dark were made of your own imagination. And in that moment, a silence deeper than thought appears. A stillness not because you forced the mind to stop, but because you saw there was never anything wrong. So perhaps, rather than trying to silence your thoughts, you might simply watch them like clouds passing across the sky. And perhaps, rather than trying to fix yourself, you might notice that you were never broken. Because in truth, the problems your mind creates are like ripples in still water, reflections of movement, not reality. And the moment you stop chasing them, you begin to see the beauty of the lake itself. And that, my dear friend, is where the journey begins. Not in controlling the mind, but in understanding it. The mind's restlessness is not your enemy. It is simply the echo of the ego, terrified of disappearing into the vast, peaceful silence that is your true nature. You see, when you look very closely, the human being is not so much a creature of flesh and bone, but a marvelous pattern of energy dancing, shimmering, constantly in motion. And yet somewhere along the way, this magnificent dance convinced itself that it was a thing, a solid, separate me. And that illusion, my friends, is what we call the ego. Now, the ego isn't evil. It's not the villain of the story. It's simply confused. It's like a little child lost in the supermarket, clutching a shopping list it can't read, desperately trying to look important. The ego wants to control because it believes it's alone. It says, if I don't hold on, I'll disappear. If I don't plan, I'll fail. If I don't think of every possible danger, something terrible will happen. And so, it spins and spins and spins until it becomes dizzy from its own motion. Trying to control the future, I once said, is like trying to take the current out of the river and put it in a bucket. You can't do it. The moment you try, the river stops being a river. It becomes stagnant water. And that's exactly what happens to the mind when it clings to control. It loses its flow. Now, the ego loves to disguise control as intelligence. It says, I'm not anxious. I'm just being responsible. But have you noticed, the more we try to control life, the more it controls us? We begin to organize every minute, analyze every word, plan every emotion until we are imprisoned by our own systems. We become like a spider trapped in its own web, spinning threads of thought to feel secure and then wondering why we can't move. You see, the real joke of it all is that control is the very thing that makes life uncontrollable. Because control is based on fear, the fear that life might not take care of you. And when you fear life, you stand apart from it. You resist it. You fight with it. But what you fight, you strengthen. And so the ego, in trying to be safe, becomes the source of its own danger. You might notice this in small things. The student who studies not for love of learning but for fear of failing. The lover who clings too tightly, afraid to lose the beloved, and thus drives them away. The seeker who meditates to achieve peace and finds only frustration. All these are forms of control disguised as devotion. And the irony is delicious. The very effort to secure happiness makes it vanish. The desire for security, I said, is itself a form of insecurity. When you grasp at certainty, you affirm doubt. When you try to make things permanent, you forget that impermanence is what makes them beautiful. Have you ever noticed that the most breathtaking moments in life are fleeting? A sunset, a laugh, a first kiss, the sound of rain. They come and go like visitors who refuse to stay and yet leave behind the fragrance of eternity. But the ego, poor thing, doesn't trust that. It says, no, no, no. I must make this moment last forever. And so it tightens its grip, not realizing that in holding on, it crushes what it loves. Like a person trying to catch a soap bubble, it bursts the moment it's touched. That is the root of illusion. The belief that life must be managed. But life is not a problem to be solved. It is a mystery to be experienced. And the deeper you go into that mystery, the more you see there was never anything to manage in the first place. You and I are all as much continuous with the physical universe, I once said, as a wave is continuous with the ocean. The wave that tries to control the ocean will only exhaust itself. But when it realizes, I am the ocean, control becomes unnecessary. There is movement, yes, but no controller. There is thought, but no thinker. There is life, but no separate you directing it. Just the grand spontaneous unfolding of the universe, pretending to be a person for a while. So long as the ego believes it must be in charge, it will keep creating illusions to justify its existence. It will say, there's a problem, something to fix, something to worry about. Because if there are no problems, the ego is unemployed. And a mind that is unemployed begins to notice silence. And silence terrifies the ego because in silence it begins to dissolve. That's why people can't sit still. They must check something, plan something, fix something, anything but just be. But you see, silence is not the absence of life. It is the presence of reality. The ego calls it boredom, but the wise call it peace. Let me put it another way. You don't control your heart beating, do you? You don't sit there saying, right, let's pump some blood now. You don't grow your hair, digest your food, or fall asleep on command. These things happen of themselves, spontaneously. And yet, the same intelligence that grows your fingernails also moves the stars and spins the galaxies. Do you really think it needs your help to manage your day? When you begin to trust that intelligence, that flow, something magical happens. You stop fighting with the current and start floating with it. And in that floating, you discover something you've forgotten. Life knows what it's doing. It doesn't need to be controlled. It needs only to be seen, felt, and loved as it is. So perhaps the invitation here is not to conquer the mind, nor to silence it by force, but to see through it. To recognize that the one who tries to control is itself the cause of chaos. And when you see that clearly, there's no need to fight. The illusion fades on its own. As I've said before, muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. When you stop stirring, clarity appears. When you stop touching, peace reveals itself. And in that peace, you realize something extraordinary. You were never the controller. You were never even the thinker. You were simply the awareness watching the great play of existence unfold exactly as it should. You know, it's a rather amusing habit we humans have. When nothing's wrong, we go searching for something. If life is quiet, the mind says, surely I must be missing something. It's as though we can't stand the sound of peace. We must fill it with commentary, plans, and questions that lead nowhere. We think about living so much that we forget to actually live. Now, I don't mean that thought itself is bad. Oh, no. Thinking is a wonderful tool. It's how you build bridges, compose music, design spaceships, or make a good cup of tea. But when the tool begins to use the carpenter, you've got a problem. And that's what overthinking is. The tool has taken over the craftsman. It's like having an orchestra that never stops rehearsing, even when the concert's long over. A person who thinks all the time, I once said, has nothing to think about except thoughts. So, he loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusions. That's precisely what happens. We get trapped inside a hall of mirrors where every thought reflects another thought. Reflections of reflections until we forget which way is out. You've probably felt it. A single doubt appears. A whisper. What if I fail? And before you know it, the mind has built an entire movie complete with sound effects, dialogue, tragedy, and a disastrous ending. It's magnificent storytelling, except it's all fiction. Overthinking manufactures suffering the way a factory produces smoke. The machine keeps running even when there's nothing left to make. But here's the paradox. The more you try to stop thinking, the more you think about not thinking. You've noticed this, haven't you? You sit to relax and suddenly you're thinking about relaxing, analyzing whether you're relaxing properly, comparing your level of relaxation to others. It's ridiculous but wonderfully human. You see, thought feeds on itself. The moment you identify with it, it multiplies like rabbits in a meadow. The key is not to kill the rabbits, but to realize you're not one of them. You are the meadow, vast, silent, and open, upon which thoughts come and go. To have faith, I said, is to trust yourself to the water. When you swim, you don't grab hold of the water because if you do, you will sink and drown. Overthinking is exactly that, grabbing at the water. You try to control the flow of life, to calculate every outcome. But the moment you tighten your grip, you begin to drown. And so many people are drowning not in life itself, but in the waves of their own mind. They mistake turbulence for depth, confusion for insight, and analysis for awareness. But awareness is different. It's not something you do. It's something you allow. It's the quiet seeing behind the noise. The spaciousness in which thought arises, dances, and dissolves. When you watch your mind without judgment, something extraordinary happens. The storm begins to calm on its own. I recall once saying, the more a thing tends to be permanent, the more it tends to be lifeless. And that applies perfectly to thought. The thinker wants permanence, wants conclusions, answers, certainties. But life is not a conclusion. Life is a question endlessly unfolding. And the beauty of the question is that it doesn't need an answer. It is the answer dancing in motion. Overthinking is the refusal to dance. It's standing at the edge of the floor, analyzing the rhythm, measuring the tempo, judging the steps until the song ends, and you realize you never moved. Now, look closely, and you'll see that overthinking always has a flavor of fear. It's the mind's attempt to secure itself against the unknown. But the unknown is the only place where life truly happens. The known is the past. The unknown is alive. So when the mind fears uncertainty, it fears life itself. That's the tragedy of overthinking. It's a cage built from thoughts about safety, and yet it suffocates the very freedom it seeks. Think of it like this. You stand before a wide, flowing river, the current of existence. The overthinker stands on the bank analyzing the water, measuring its depth, calculating the temperature, wondering whether it's safe to jump in, and the day ends and the river moves on while they remain dry, safe, and utterly unfulfilled. The wise one, however, smiles and dives because he knows that the only way to know the river is to enter it. When you look at the way we live today, always connected, always comparing, always planning, you see a civilization addicted to thought. We think about happiness more than we feel it. We talk about love more than we allow it. We plan for the future more than we inhabit the present. And yet, the moment we drop all that mental noise, even for a few seconds, the world shines differently, sharper, clearer, kinder. The sunlight on a wall becomes poetry. The sound of your own breath feels like music. And you realize, this is it. This right now was what you were chasing all along. But you can't think your way into it. You can only notice that it's been here all the time. Let me tell you something rather paradoxical. When you finally stop trying to fix your mind, it begins to fix itself. When you stop trying to understand every thought, understanding arises naturally. It's as though life is waiting patiently for you to get out of your own way. The real you, I once said, is not a puppet which life pushes around. The real, deep down you is the whole universe. And the universe is not sitting somewhere worrying about what might go wrong. It moves effortlessly from birth to death, from tide to tide, without the slightest trace of anxiety. Overthinking is forgetting that you belong to that flow. It's imagining you are separate from the stream, that you are the captain steering the boat instead of the water moving effortlessly through the course it was always meant to take. So perhaps the next time the mind starts spinning its web, what if this? What if that? You can smile and say, "Ah, there you are again, old friend." Don't fight it. Don't feed it. Just watch it dance, knowing it's only the play of the wind upon the surface of the lake. And maybe then, in a quiet moment between thoughts, you'll hear something deeper. Not a voice, but a presence. The stillness that was there before the first thought arose and will remain after the last thought fades. That stillness is you. That silence is not empty. It's full of life. It's what you've been seeking through all that thinking. What a delightful trick the universe plays to make you chase the peace you already are. You see, once the mind grows quiet, once the storm of thought begins to settle, something very curious happens. You start to notice that the world isn't the frightening, chaotic place you thought it was. It's not even a puzzle to be solved. It's a dance, an intricate, spontaneous performance where every step, every turn, every fall and rise fits perfectly into the music of existence. And then it dawns on you. The world was never broken. It was only your idea of it that was cracked. What a relief that is, to realize that all along it wasn't life that needed fixing. It was our perception that needed softening. You see, the ego spends its whole life trying to straighten out the waves of the ocean. It wants everything calm, predictable, and still. But an ocean without waves is not an ocean. It's a puddle. And life without contrast, without ups and downs, would be equally dull. The universe in its great playfulness designed this experience to be textured. Light and dark, joy and sorrow, sound and silence. Without noise there is no music. Without tension there is no story. Without shadows we would never notice the light. We cannot be more sensitive to pleasure, I once said, without being more sensitive to pain. That is the rhythm of being alive. The pulse of opposites. And when you understand this, suffering takes on a new meaning. It ceases to be an error and becomes part of the symphony. But most people, you see, are trying to live the melody without the bass line. They want happiness without sadness, peace without change, life without death. And that's like trying to draw a mountain without valleys. You cannot have one side of the coin without the other. The ego hates this truth. It wants control, and control means preference, this but not that. It loves the sunrise but curses the sunset, not realizing they are the same event seen from different directions. Life, on the other hand, does not discriminate. It embraces it all. Joy and grief, birth and decay, because it knows they belong together. Have you ever looked at a forest after a fire? It seems tragic at first. The trees blackened, the earth silent. But then months later, new shoots emerge, green, vivid, alive. The fire was not destruction. It was transformation. And so it is with life. Every apparent loss clears the way for renewal. Every heartbreak breaks open a deeper capacity to love. Every silence after noise is a preparation for new music. You see, the universe does not make mistakes. It only changes forms. You and I are all as much continuous with the physical universe as a wave is continuous with the ocean. When the wave rises, we call it creation. When it falls, we call it death. But the ocean remains vast, eternal, unbroken. And that ocean, my friend, is you. Now, it's a very strange game we play. We spend our lives dividing reality into good and bad, right and wrong, success and failure. But the moment you start judging life, you stop seeing it. You become like a critic at a concert who's so busy evaluating the notes that he forgets to hear the music. You see, existence isn't a problem. It's an art form. It's not meant to be analyzed. It's meant to be experienced. But we've become so obsessed with controlling the painting that we've forgotten to feel the colors. And yet, when you let go, when you drop the measuring stick, something magical happens. You see beauty everywhere, in the imperfection, in the chaos, in the moments that don't make sense. You realize that even your confusion was part of the design. Let me tell you something. The world does not need saving. It needs seeing. Because once you see clearly, you stop trying to fix what was never broken. You stop fighting life and instead you begin to dance with it. We do not come into this world. We come out of it as leaves from a tree. You are not a stranger here. You are not an outsider trying to make sense of the world. You are the world looking at itself through human eyes. You are the universe having a brief moment of self-awareness, saying, so this is what I am. And in that moment of recognition, the war within ends. Because how can the ocean be at war with its own waves? How can life be against itself? When you see life as it is, not as the mind thinks it should be, a deep peace arises, not the peace of everything going your way, but the peace of no longer needing it to. There is a lightness in realizing that everything is already happening as it must. The seasons turn, the stars move, the heart beats, and all of it, every laugh, every tear, every loss and gain, is the universe expressing itself perfectly. That's why I say the world was never broken, it only appeared broken to the one trying to control it. When the illusion of control fades, what remains is harmony. A harmony so vast, so subtle that it includes even your sense of disharmony. What a magnificent trick! Even your confusion is part of the pattern. Even your mistakes are the universe playing with possibilities. So the invitation is this: stop fixing, stop judging, stop demanding that life makes sense. Instead, watch. Observe the play as you would a sunset without trying to improve it. Feel the hum of existence beneath your skin, and you'll realize that everything, yes, everything, is in its rightful place. The world doesn't need your control. It needs your participation. It needs you to dance. Because when you dance with life, you don't worry about each step. You simply move with the rhythm, trusting the music to guide you. And that, my dear friend, is the moment you awaken to the beauty that was always here. The world has not betrayed you. It has been quietly waiting for you to see it as it truly is, complete, alive, and gloriously unbroken. So, here we are at the end of this long conversation. Perhaps you've begun to sense it, that quiet, gentle truth hiding beneath all the noise. There was never anything wrong with life. There was only the illusion that you needed to control it. You see, my dear friend, all along you were chasing something that was never lost. Peace, freedom, fulfillment. You searched for them in thoughts, in plans, in achievements. But they were always here, silently watching you like the sky watching the clouds drift by. We humans are funny creatures, aren't we? We build entire religions, philosophies, and systems of thought, all trying to teach us how to be what we already are. It's as though the ocean was sending itself on a course to learn how to be wet. But perhaps that's the greatest joke of all, that the very effort to become keeps you from simply being. And when you finally stop striving, when you give up the exhausting project of fixing yourself and the world, you suddenly find that everything you were seeking has been quietly waiting inside you all along. The meaning of life, I once said, is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. And yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. We live as though existence owes us an explanation. But what if existence is the explanation? What if the purpose of the dance is simply to dance? Life is not a riddle to be solved. It's a song to be sung. And every note, even the dissonant ones, are part of the beauty. Now, the ego, that clever little illusion, will whisper, yes, yes, I understand all this, but how do I let go? Tell me the method. Tell me the steps. But the very act of trying to let go is the same old control wearing a new mask. You can't force surrender any more than you can force sleep. It happens when you stop forcing. When you stop trying to be still and instead notice that stillness was always there beneath the movement. Letting life be is not a technique. It's a recognition. It's seeing that you were never separate from the flow. That you, the thinker, the doer, the seeker, were never in charge of the dance at all. You might remember the old Zen saying, sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes and the grass grows by itself. That is the essence of it. When you stop meddling, life unfolds beautifully on its own. It's not laziness. It's trust. It's understanding that the same intelligence that moves galaxies also moves through you, guiding your breath, beating your heart, and arranging every moment with perfect timing. And once you see that, once you feel that, control becomes unnecessary. You begin to laugh more easily, cry more freely, forgive more quickly because you realize it was all part of the music. You see, life doesn't need to be perfect to be precious. The cracks, the flaws, the mistakes, they are what let the light through. We keep waiting for everything to align before we allow ourselves to be happy. But happiness isn't the result of perfection. It's the recognition of the sacred in the ordinary. The sound of rain. The warmth of tea in your hands. The way sunlight dances through the window in the morning. These are not trivial moments. They are miracles we keep missing because we were too busy thinking about something else. Too busy trying to make life better when it was already perfect in its imperfection. You know, I often say, when you realize that you live in the present and only in the present, you begin to have a very different sense of being. And that's the heart of it. Right here, right now, this breath, this sound, this heartbeat, is all that ever was and all that will ever be. The future is a thought. The past is a memory. And the present, well, it's not a moment at all. It's eternity happening now. When you touch that, when you live without trying to escape the now, you find that nothing was ever missing. You find peace, not because you built it, but because you stopped running from it. The art of letting life be is not passive. It's the highest form of participation. It means you are so in tune with existence that you no longer stand apart judging or resisting. You become like a dancer who has forgotten the steps yet somehow moves in perfect rhythm with the music. And when you live like that, each day becomes a kind of miracle. Even your struggles shine with quiet meaning. Even your sorrow feels sacred because you understand it was all necessary. Every mistake, every delay, every detour was part of bringing you to this very moment where you can finally see that life never betrayed you. The more you try to control the world, I said, the less control you will have. But when you relax, the world begins to move with you. That's the secret. The dance doesn't begin until you stop fighting the rhythm. When you surrender, you don't lose control. You discover there was never a need for it. You realize that life was always carrying you even when you thought you were lost. And in that realization, in that laugh through tears, a great stillness arrives, not because you forced the mind to stop, but because you finally saw that there was never any problem to solve. Life isn't happening to you. It's happening as you. You and the universe were never two. So if you remember anything from this conversation, let it be this: you are not a separate observer of life. You are life itself. Playing, breathing, dreaming, pretending for a while to be a small person with problems and plans. And when you see through that game, when you finally laugh at the beautiful absurdity of it all, the world opens up fresh and alive as it always was. So, my friend, stop trying to fix what was never broken. Stop chasing what was never missing. Stop searching for the peace that's been watching you all along. Just let life be. And when you do, you'll find yourself smiling. Not because you understand everything, but because you no longer need to. For in the end, the greatest wisdom is not found in knowing, but in trusting. Not in holding on, but in letting go.